It is raining outside, which means it's June, which means it's time for me to talk about my favorite movies of the year so far. That's just how it works. Fall festival season is just around the corner. This list is about to get obliterated by, who knows, Joker 2? We don't know. So I want to make this video to give these films the time to shine. I'm going to go in alphabetical order so that I don't spoil anything in the end of the year top 10, even though, again, this will not be the list by the end of the year. I'll just tell you that much. Bird. Yes, Bird. Which actually doesn't have a release date yet. There's no plan for distribution that I know of. It's one of the best movies of the year, hands down. It is my only Andrea Arnold movie. Maybe that's why I love it so much, is because I'm so unfamiliar with her game. This kind of blew my mind with just how tender and gentle it was. I expected kind of a by-the-books character study that was very grounded, and you know, we've all seen that movie before. But this thing ended up being so weird, and it had so much color and personality. There's so much heart and humor to it. Situations that I would normally see as really scary and intense and aggressive were definitely that, but they had so much lightness to them that I wasn't used to. There was so much nuance to every scene in this movie. It was really beautiful to watch. I also think it's hands down my favorite looking thing of the year so far. I'm looking at the rest of this, and I'm pretty sure that I stand by that. Yeah, it's just got like I want to say 16 millimeter. I think it's 16 millimeter. Look about it. That's just, it's so crunchy and kind of like fuzzy around literally fuzzy around the edges. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. Yeah. Next on this list is Challengers. Luca Guadagnino's Challengers should come as no surprise to anyone here. You guys know how much I love that movie. It is currently number 1 on this list. I guess I can spoil that. Yeah, it's my favorite movie of the year so far. I think it is incredibly sexy, probably the sexiest movie I've seen in a long time, but also really touching. And not enough people are talking about that, or at least they don't feel like talking about that because how sexy it is. But like, I don't know, as someone who grew up doing sports, who understands that the sports culture is so intense and you basically have to live in that world growing up, it's a really aggressive environment to be in. To have that stripped away from you and then learning how to put that energy into something else is really fascinating, and I haven't really seen a sports movie do that properly and capture just how intense that feeling is. And Challengers is such a wild ride that really nails it, and anyone who has at any point been an athlete can probably understand just how, I don't know, thrilling this movie is. And that is just speaking about Zendaya's part in the film. I think she's a really incredible character in the movie, but Mike Feist, is that how you pronounce it? Him and Josh O'Connor's characters are both also incredibly complex and add so much depth to the story. It's just so rich. I hate to compare it to Succession, but it does remind me a lot of Succession and just how juicy a lot of these character dynamics are. It's really fun to watch. Jesus. A lot of lightning. Yeah, I really love Challengers. I also think it's beautifully directed, amazing score. I'm going to save this for the end of the year. It's probably going to make that list. Next up, we have Christmas Eve and Miller's Point, which I know does have a plan to be released later this year. But I really liked this movie. I think it has a very distinct and unique voice behind it. I could have lived in this film for 3 hours if it let me. It's such a rich atmosphere that reminds me of like Robert Altman's Nashville, and I don't say that just because there are a lot of characters here to follow, which let me just say they follow them so easily. It doesn't ever feel like it has too much on its plate, but also just it's a vibe movie, you know? And I love vibe movies. I love movies that get vibes right. A lot of that can be owed to this amazing soundtrack that's playing like mostly throughout the film, and the production design is so lived in. It's really well done all around. I really enjoyed watching this. I could watch it all day. Be on the lookout for this one. Next up on the list we have Dune Part 2. This is a big one. You guys probably heard of it. Denis Villeneuve's Dune. I can't remember if the first Dune made my list that year, but this is probably definitely going to make the list. It's up there with Challengers. They're kind of neck and neck as far as the two. I'll say a light masterpiece. I think it's a little too early to call either of them masterpieces, but I'll call them light masterpieces for now. I'm not the biggest sci-fi guy in the world, but this is how I like my sci-fi, just big and epic and a lot of attention towards the characters. The world building is so much better than it was in the first one, and I really liked the first one. Keep that in mind. But the characters here are just so interesting. Again, another example, but on a completely different side of the spectrum, budget-wise, of someone balancing a lot of characters who all have very complicated backgrounds, super easily. I get such a vivid portrait of the whole group here, of the world that it takes place in. The action sequences are just phenomenal. It is a capital S spectacle. I wish this was still in theaters. It actually probably is still in theaters if I look. Yeah, probably one of the most memorable movie-going experiences of my entire life. You don't get surprised that often these days when you go to the theater and see something of that size. It's like everyone's kind of trying to be the biggest thing, and most of the time it's very rare that something wows me, but Dune Part 2 wowed me from front to back. And talk about the fastest 3 hours of all time. That's what I will say. Next up, we got Furiosa, which is another big old blockbuster that didn't actually bust a whole lot of blocks, but I really liked it. I thought this was a really interesting take on a Mad Max movie, having caught up with all the other Mad Max movies except for Thunderdome. I thought this was honestly one of the most well-written Mad Max films, which is funny to say because there actually isn't that much dialogue. It's not like there's anything actually written, but I think the story and some of the dialogue near the end where it gets a little bit more word-heavy really moved me, and I thought was so simple yet so powerful, which I know sounds silly because it's like Chris Hemsworth being goofy, but I don't know. This is another one that has just a thick atmosphere to it that isn't perfect. I don't love it visually as much as Fury Road, but it really makes up for it in the narrative, which I thought was super strong. And definitely one of the more unique movie-going experiences of the year. Let's see. Next up, we have I Saw the TV Glow, which also should not come as a big surprise to anybody. Really liked this one. Also a big fan of Jane Schoenbrun's last film, We're All Going to the World's Fair. A lot of people were telling me in my What I Watched This Month coverage for this that I didn't bring up the whole trans subtext of it, which I don't even know if I would call it subtext. Like, the whole movie is about the trans experience. And to be honest, I didn't bring it up because I'm not trans. I don't really know too much about that experience. I can't speak on it, but I should have brought it up in the review. I will admit to that. But that's the thing about this movie. I don't think there's one way to describe it. I think it's doing a whole lot of things that resonate with a lot of people. And that's where I think Schoenbrun is kind of a genius, is that they don't focus specifically on the trans subtext here. That's not the only thing going on in the film. I do think it's also valid to say it is a film about nostalgia and how we look at media and look back at media and how that forms our identities. And I think it's an especially special film these days just because of how much media shapes so many people's personalities. It's, even though it takes place, decades before right now, it's more relevant than ever. I think it's a really powerful movie that is visually striking. They have one of the clearest visions out there right now, probably like top 5 most exciting filmmakers to watch. Yeah, really loved this one. It just, makes me so excited to see where their career goes from here. Next up, we have Kinds of Kindness, which I'm actually doing a video on right now. It should be dropping later this week. And honestly, it was in here before, but just writing this fucking video, I'm like, God damn, is it a good movie? I think it's going to be interesting this week, more people seeing it. I do not think it will be as universally loved as Poor Things or even The Favorite, or even Killing of a Sacred Deer. I think it will be one of his most divisive movies, and I really love that about it. I think he really swings for the fences, is his most Yorgos he's ever been, but also not really relying on any old tricks. I think he's doing something completely new for him. I think the film, as a commentary on how we show love and sacrifice ourselves for the people we love, is really interesting. And it's commentary on abuse at the same time is also very thought-provoking. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but I feel like I've done a decent job. It's a really fun ride. It's a really intense and heavy ride. And by heavy, I don't mean like emotionally devastating or anything. If anything, it's actually like pretty empty and hollow, but intentionally. I mean heavy in that, like, it's a marathon of Yorgos Lanthimos. If you don't like his stuff, you're gonna hate this. If you do like it, like myself, just go into it with open arms and just have a good time. It's a good time. Next up, we have Monkey Man, just barely squeaking its way into this top 10. Some of you may have forgotten about this movie. I feel like no one talks about Monkey Man anymore, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the most impressive directorial debuts of the year. I think the action is really unique. I'm so sick of seeing the same action over and over again. Similar to Dune, where it's like, I feel like especially after Everything Everywhere, a lot of filmmakers are trying to do this maximalist thing and like try to wow you with how much and like how fun they can be. I feel like we're at this stage stage where so many films want to be the fun movie, but it's done so sloppily. And I wouldn't call Monkey Man not sloppy. It is a little rough around the edges, but I think that's such a huge part of its appeal. I think this is such a fun and alive movie with so much flavor to its action that it's like you can see the breakage in certain shots. You're like, oh my god, they did literally break a camera doing this. And I think that kind of stuff is exciting. And I also think for an action movie, that's not just the one appeal of it. I think it has so much depth to it. I think Dev Patel's, the amount of risks he takes here are beyond admirable. I really liked Monkey Man, and I want to give it some more love throughout the year. Next up, we have Sperm World, one of 2 Lance Oppenheim projects this year. The only documentary on this list, which is a little concerning, but it's a really amazing documentary. I think Lance Oppenheim, I think he's one of the most exciting filmmakers working today, especially with documentary. He is doing documentary in a way that's very refreshing for the form. I feel like that whole style has gotten really exhausting with the HBO Max and Netflix bullshit. Can't believe I just said HBO Max. That's not. But you get what I mean. It's so refreshing to see a documentary done so artfully and with such humor and nuance. And he really cares about his subjects, which is a huge appeal here. I feel like so many documentaries are just trying to make them look as crazy as possible. But I think his movies both get a lot of juice out of what they're filming. Like you get a lot of personality and a lot of color, and there's certainly some weird people, but you never get the sense that they're making fun of these people. There's a lot of heart to it, and yeah, Sperm World is a really incredible example of that. And lastly, we have The Substance, which actually I don't know if it's going to come out this year, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. This is the latest from Coralie Fargier, director of Revenge, which I thought was pretty good, but this one really blew me away at Cannes. It is a wild ride of body horror and humor and just over the top. I will say it, camp. I'm not entirely confident that I know what that word means anymore, but that is just all I could think of when I was watching it. I think this is a campy movie. I think it is very on the surface. I think it's just completely ridiculous at times. I don't think it's saying anything that's going to blow anybody's minds, but as I said in my Cannes video, it's how it's saying it. I think this is one of the most abrasive films I've seen in recent years, and I can't wait to see it again. It's just a hoot. Jesus. And those are my favorite movies of the year so far. There are also some honorable mentions like Problemista, Megalopolis, Love Lies Bleeding, Planet of the Apes. And if you're wondering what the worst movie of the year so far is, it's Madam Web. And that's going to be that might still be the one by the end of the year. But that's my list. What do you guys think are the best movies of the year so far? Let me know. Let me know, God damn it. All right.